The minions thought us as gods, you see, which was all very flattering, and we were new at space-time exploration. So we thought we could help. We gave them medical and scientific aid, better communication, better weapons. They kicked us out at gunpoint. Then they went to war with each other, learned how to split the atom, discovered the toothbrush, and finally split the planet. Say what you want about this story, but that quote, especially when he brings up the toothbrush, brilliant. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Underworld, written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, and directed by Norman Stewart. Yeah, we're going to have to talk about Norman Stewart's story. Oops. This is a 4-part adventure, and the backstory to this story is very complicated. Before I begin, I just want to say that this is a story I hardly hear anyone talk about. A lot of stories, they're so good that everybody talks about, or they're so bad that everybody talks about. Or maybe you've got some okay stories, but there's some moments that everybody talks about. But this story, I have literally heard nothing mentioned about it in terms of reviews or just generally people's opinions. The only thing I can find really is in Doctor Who magazine. It was always rated the worst 4th Doctor adventure, and in a certain poll where they counted certain votes, it was one of a few stories that had 0 votes. Yeah, nobody seems to think about this story. Now, a lot of stories during this era were inspired by literature, and this one is no exception. It is inspired by Jason and the Quest for the Golden Fleece, I believe it's called. I could be wrong. So yeah, it has a much more mythical feeling compared to previous Doctor Who stories. It's also very important to note that 2 things really important to note. A, this was just around the corner from Star Wars. At this point in history, in the 70s, sci-fi was big. There were a lot of just sci-fi stuff coming out. Blake 7, I believe, was at least being made around about the same time. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was being released in radio drama format. And yeah, so at this point in time, sci-fi was really big, and Graham Williams wanted to capitalise on that by giving this very grittier sci-fi storyline to this story. However, the second thing to point out is the budget for this story was dramatically cut, and so we get a story where 9 out of 10 of the scenes are in front of a green screen. This is 70s green screen, mind you. So it has a lot of visual glitches, and it's just a strange, bizarre story. And for that, I think we should really talk about it. I mean, it's a very unique story. You can't tell me there are any more Doctor Who stories like this. But yeah, so let's delve into the story. The Doctor and Leela arrive on a spaceship run by the Mayans of Magnos. The Doctor describes them as people who went for Time Lords for help, and they believed them as gods. And so the Doctor's people in the past helped them, and then they basically destroyed their own planet with only 2 ships surviving. And because of this, the Time Lords had their non-interference policy. So this is actually a bit of backstory for the Time Lords as well. They also explain that, probably really controversial now, that the Time Lords actually gave the Mayans the ability to regenerate. In fact, their regenerated limit is unlimited. They can regenerate as much as physically possible. Only they don't change appearance, they just seem to get younger, and their personalities stay the same. So it's kind of funny that these people, in terms of their genetic abilities, are probably much more better than Time Lords themselves. So it just goes to Russell T Davis's fan theory, in which the 13 limit was actually pressed upon by Rassilon. But that all could be a whole other story for another episode. Today we're talking about the Underworld. And so the Doctor, Leela and K9, they get introduced to this crew. And the first episode is mainly about the Doctor getting introduced to these characters and learning what's going on. And it really suffers mainly because of the writing. I believe the actors, or at least some of the actors, are trying to do their absolute best with this script. And I really sympathise with them. But man, they are just so bland and forgettable. I can't remember any of their names, any character traits, apart from the leader's a bit of a dick. But it's not like it's pressed on. It's these characters are actually really unlikable when we get in through later parts of the story. And so, yeah, character-wise, this is really forgettable, and it's only really worth watching for the Doctor and Leela, which have some really good scenes. For example, when Leela threatens to attack people on the ship, they have a weapon which calms people down, and they shoot Leela with it, and Leela calms down, and she's like looking at the crewman, and she's like, "Ooh, he's pretty." I really like how she grabs one of them by the cheek at one point, and when the Doctor knocks her back to her usual self, she gets really angry, and she threatens to kill whoever did it to her. And when the Doctor tries to talk to her, Leela is like, "You're laughing at me. You're taking the mick because you're taking the mick that I'm such like a stupid person, basically." And I mean, don't get me wrong, this story is not particularly great, but man, there are some really great moments with the Doctor and Leela in this story. I may even say it's some of my favourite moments. But yeah. And so they're following another ship. One of the main ships are travelling to get to the other one. On the other one, there's actually two containers which contain the DNA of their species. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try and take these and go to a different planet so that they can rebuild their civilization. But every time they get close, the signal brings them somewhere else, and they keep following them. They've been doing this for thousands of years. As the Doctor explains it, they're actually millions of years old. So they're probably most likely older than the Doctor, every character in this story. So it is kind of funny to think that the Doctor is the third youngest character in this story, or at least in episode 1. And whilst they're there, they get some rocks forming onto them, and the hull is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and soon they're going to be crushed under their own weight as a planet is getting formed around them. Some of the effects on the model effects are actually really good. I especially like any bits with the ship, and I like when they crash into the planet later on, because the cliffhanger for part 1 is that they're trying to boost out, but they're struggling. And then part 2 is them escaping, and because of the gravity, they get pushed back in, and they go underground, and they find a whole tunnel. Now, up this point then, they discover that this is where the green screen effects happen, as the Doctor and Leela and these crew members they go out to try and explore this world, to try and find these cylinders, only to find that there are actually a bunch of people there, miners, who have never seen the sky. In fact, when Leela talks to one of them, he doesn't believe that he's surprised to find out that stars are real. And they seem to be working for a group of people who serve the Oracle, a creature of immense mental capacity. So I think this might be a great time to talk about Norman Stewart's directing. He's not a particularly favourable director in the series. He directed 2 stories. This is his first one. His second one we will get onto in the next season. And he gets a lot of criticism, and maybe for his second story he might deserve it. We'll talk about that when we get there. But here, like I said, there was a huge budget cut, and they used a lot of green screen really early on and during the 70s. So this is really primitive green screen, or blue screen, whatever which version they were using at the time. And yes, when they are out in the caves, the scenes look horrible, and even the cut-in just looks really odd. There's a bit where the minions are talking to each other, and there's 3 on one side and 1 on the other side. And for some reason, I don't know if it's the directing or the cutting or the editing, but you really feel the jump of the cut, which you shouldn't do. A cut should be feeling flawlessly. And there are some really awkward close-ups, especially with Leela, the Doctor, and a few of the slaves of this underworld planet. But to say that all of it is terrible might be an overstatement. For example, when they are using studio sets, there are some really great moments. One of my favourite moments is when, in terms of directing, is when the Doctor, almost being gassed, sucks all the air back into the vents to go back to where the villains work out. And the camera looks out at 2 rooms. One of them is in a glass, and then you've got people on the outside. And the smoke comes in and suffocates the people on the outside, and then the camera zooms in, looking at the people on the inside, and they don't really notice until they look around and they see the gas. That is inspired. That is some really great directing right there. And there are some really great moments of directing throughout the story. It's just they're so few and far between that they're not really worth bringing the story up and going, hey, this story actually has really good directing, mention this, and this. Because the majority of the story, was really bland, really forgettable, and so the Doctor gets to meet up. So back to the story. The Doctor meets up with some of the slave people, and he befriends one of them. I can't remember his name. I believe his name is Jackson. I believe his name is. Basically, he's the surrogate Jason of this story from the quest of the Golden Fleece. And he helps the Doctor out, and I do actually kind of like this character. He's not particularly memorable, but he's a nice, charming character who feels betrayed and stuff. And because he's much more, I wouldn't say savage, he's much more less progressive than Leela, and so Leela gets to talk to him, and she gets to be the smart one. That's some really great dynamic and very unique. So props to that. There's also a great moment in which the Doctor and Leela are talking about these slaves, and the Doctor mentions that they are the distant ancestors of the people that they were working with on the ship. And the Doctor says something like, they could be his great grandfather. And when the Doctor walks off, Leela goes, I really love that moment. It's a really great moment. And there's also some great moments in which K9 is talking to the Doctor, and the Doctor says something like, they discovered there's ion drives there. And the Doctor's like, ion drives? Or I'm a Budgie's cousin. And the K9's like, affirmative on the ion drive, negative on the family relations. That's a really funny moment. But like I said, these moments are really far and few between. And the majority of the story is about the Doctor trying to save these slave people. And like I said, you befriend one of them. Or at least I enjoyed the company of one of them. The rest of them are really bland and forgettable. I don't think they actually have any character. It's only really one of them that actually gets a character. And so I think the story does pick up a little bit in terms of plot, but it's still nothing too amazing. And when we get to part 4, the Doctor discovers that the Oracle, the one who's ruling all these people to try and the slaves and their leaders and stuff, is actually a computer that has gone mad with power. And yeah, it's a complete rip-off of The Face of Evil. And it's just so disappointing that this element feels very similar to that story. The Doctor even mentions, even like banters with it, like this exactly the same way, and just shouts at it and how it's just another megalomaniac machine. So I do like the fact that the Doctor does point it out. Not to say that these are the only 2 times where the Doctor's versed a mad computer. I mean, the 3rd Doctor's versed Boss. There's probably a few others, I just can't remember. Wotan from the 1st Doctor story, The War Machine. So it's not an original concept to begin with, but what makes this one weaker than usual is that not only does it borrow a lot of elements from a previous story where it feels like a rip-off, but that rip-off was very earlier shown. I mean, that was Leela's first story, and Leela is still there, so it is really disappointing. And the Doctor, basically, the Oracle comes up with a plan that she gives the 2 golden tubes, but she's put them with grenades, and so she gives it to them, to the Mayans, and say, right, we will give you these, just leave us in peace, just leave us rule these slaves, and you can have what you want. And they take it, and they bugger off. They don't, not once do they go, these people that we were helped to save, maybe we should stay here and save them. So at this point, I thought that our main characters, these people that we're supposed to be following, are very unlikable, and I was not rooting for them at all. In fact, when I found out that they were bombs, I thought it would have been a great idea to have it explode in their faces, just to show, just to be like, to get what they deserve, and then you can tie it into with them treating the Time Lords like gods and then chucking them out, and then, rinse and repeat. But no, they didn't do that. The Doctor learns about this, and so he goes back to the Oracle and gets the real tubes back, and he takes to the ship, and he gets the grenade ones, and he finds out they are megaton bombs, and it will destroy basically everything. So the Doctor runs back, gives them to the leaders to give back to the Oracle without he tries to double bluff them as he tells them they are the grenade ones, but they don't believe him. So I like that a little bit. And the Doctor convinces all the slave people to get onto the ship because the planet's about to explode. So the Doctor and Leela help rushing all these people out. And then one of the Mayan characters, the leader. This is the final moments. This is the moments where our heroes should be heroes and our villains should be villains. This is like the moment that we should at least see that the characters have grown. Tries chucking the slaves out of the ship, and only until the Doctor shouts at him, only until the Doctor is like, no, these are your people. These are the people that were in the containers. They are your ancestors, your descendants, sorry. Only then does he decide maybe they should stay. Maybe. And it's only really convinced by the Doctor being very aggressive towards him. Why should I root for these people? Why do they deserve my respect? That just ruined it. Completely ruined it. And so the ship goes off, the planet explodes, bing bang boom, that's Underworld. So overall, it's a very weak story. It's a very weak directed story. It's just weak overall. But I do think that we should talk about it more. Not because it's a good story or because it's a really, really bad story that we can all laugh at. But I do think it does show a little bit of ambition. There are some great moments of directing, just very few and far between. There are some generally great moments with the Fourth Doctor and Leela spread throughout the story, and I think there's enough to actually warrant a watch. And maybe the green screen, blue screen elements are so laughable that you could watch it because it's so bad. But there are some generic moments. The main Mayan characters are just the worst, and I was not rooting for them. And yeah, I don't know what to say really, but other than the story's pretty pants. Oh well. So that's The Underworld. So join me next time where the Doctor goes back to Gallifrey and uncover a assassination attempt again. And the Doctor and Leela discover that one of the Doctor's old foes is at it again. So join me next time for the invasion of time. See you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.